Boy, the way that Corhead quips, attacking Federation ships, croaking all you human drips. Those were the days. But now that all the wars are gone, life's become a great big yawn. And we search the galaxy for something new to cling on. Didn't need no peace accords, swarming worlds in mighty hordes, hacking our foes with our swords. Those were the days. I feel like I might be setting an unrealistic expectation. I can't promise to do a sitcom theme song spoof for every one of these Klingon episode reviews, but if one happens to suggest itself, this is a review of the Star Trek The Next Generation episode, Heart of Glory. If you have not seen this episode and you don't want to know why you should always make Klingon prisoners change their clothes before you lock them up, be warned. Spoilers beyond this point. I wasn't in touch with the larger fan community back when this episode originally aired in 1988, when I was not yet 8 years old, but I can imagine there was some anticipation for it. With the first season of Star Trek The Next Generation mostly over, there were only 6 episodes left to air after this one. This was to be our first look at the Klingons in the series. We've been told things are different now in this new generation. The Federation and the Klingon Empire are allies now, at peace. What's that like? Well, let's see. The Enterprise is called to the neutral zone to investigate reports of a recent battle. That gets Worf's attention. They arrive and find a damaged vessel, which they eventually identify as a Talarian freighter, the Batress. Data also detects residual evidence of weapons fire in the area, which might be Romulan. That gets Picard's attention. Starfleet hasn't seen hide nor hair nor pointy ears of the Romulans for a long time now. Worf detects life signs, but they're difficult to identify because of the damage to the ship. Picard tells Riker to take an away team over there, and he's like, "Not so fast, Tasha. You stay here in case whoever attacked this ship comes back for more. You're the only one who knows how to work the phasers." Riker picks Data and Geordi for the away team, but before they go, Picard pulls Geordi aside and says, "Hey, do you think we can try your visor's webcam attachment?" Geordi's like, "Sure." The team beams over to the damaged freighter, and Geordi turns on his webcam, and over on the Enterprise, Picard is immediately fascinated to see the world as Geordi does, which is nice. You know, everyone sees what the disabled person sees, and it's this really positive, wondrous experience that allows us to appreciate Geordi a little more. It's kind of hokey, but I appreciate what it's going for. Picard does have one line where he's like, "I'm finally beginning to understand him," and what? Has Geordi been an enigmatic character up to this point? Not really. He's just a regular guy, a blind dude who sees through the comb he wears on his face. What's to understand? Picard gets really into the webcam feature of Geordi's visor. He's like, "Look at Data." Geordi looks at Data. Picard says, "Why does he have an aura around him?" Geordi says, "Because he's an android." I wish he had asked Geordi to explain why the visor blow-dried Data's hair, but I guess that wasn't important enough. Finally, Riker speaks up like, "Hey, we're on a damaged ship looking for possible survivors while a dangerous enemy might still be in the vicinity, so can we stop dicking around and do what we came here to do?" Picard's like, "Oh yeah, right, the mission. Sure, go ahead." Sorry. They search the ship, they locate the survivors, 2 Klingons, Chorus and Conmel. Wait. 3 Klingons. A third, Kunivas, is badly injured. Apparently the other 2 thought he was dead, but Data's like, "Nope, he's alive, we're taking him." Chorus is like, "Ugh, fine, I'll carry him." The radiation on the ship is interfering with the Enterprise's transporter signal, but the away team and the Klingons manage to make it clear in time for Tasha to beam them out right as the ship explodes. How exciting. They rush the injured Klingon to sickbay, and on the bridge, Worf's like, "Can I go meet the Klingons, Captain? Can I go, please?" Picard's like, "Sure, come on." They go to sickbay. Dr. Crusher says it doesn't look good for Kunivas, but the other two, Chorus and Conmel, introduce themselves, and Chorus explains that they were passengers aboard that Talarian freighter. They were attacked by a Ferengi ship, and the freighter captain was inexperienced in battle, so he allowed the Klingons to take over. And of course, they defeated the Ferengi ship with their cunning and audacity, despite the enemy's superior firepower, though clearly they didn't escape unscathed. Picard has more questions, but Chorus is like, yeah, maybe later. Can we get something to eat first? Maybe catch a nap? Killing Ferengi makes us hungry and sleepy. Worf shows Chorus and Conmel to some guest quarters, and Chorus orders them some booze and snacks from the magic food hole. Chorus and Conmel ask Worf what his deal is, and Worf says, as far as I know, I'm the only Klingon in Starfleet. Chorus and Conmel take turns taunting Worf like, so what, you're just a pacifist pussy? A castrated Klingon? Instead of chopping off heads and eating hearts and drinking blood, you just... what? Have a skinless chicken breast for lunch and listen to Taylor Swift records? Chorus and Conmel are paged back to sickbay. Their buddy Kunivas is on the way out. They arrive in time to witness his death. Chorus stares into his eyes as he dies. And then Chorus, Conmel, and Worf all throw their heads back and roar. When it's over, Dr. Crusher is like, so were we thinking cremation? Open casket? Chorus says, it doesn't matter. The body is now only an empty shell. Dispose of it as you normally would. Dr. Crusher's like, all right, recycled into the food supply it is. On the walk back to their quarters, Conmel says, it's too bad the opponent who killed Kunivas wasn't an enemy. He deserved a glorious death. Worf's like, hold up, if Kunivas wasn't killed by an enemy, then who killed him? What actually happened on that ship? Chorus is like, hey, it was just this whole thing. What I want to know is, how did you end up in Starfleet, man? I bet that's an interesting and distracting story. Worf tells them his origin story, how his parents were killed in a Romulan attack, and a Starfleet officer found him in the rubble and took him home to raise as his own son. When Worf was old enough, he joined Starfleet, and yada yada yada, here we are. Conmel's like, then you haven't hung out much with other Klingons. Worf's like, not really. Chorus says, then what do you do when you get that feeling that you just gotta do some killing? Worf's like, I control my feelings. Chorus is like, then you understand how we feel. This peace, this alliance with the Federation, it's like a living death. We yearn for war. They confess that there was no Ferengi attack on their freighter. They commandeered the freighter and were on their way to find someplace new where they could settle down and embark on bloody rampages and really enjoy life like true Klingons when a Klingon battlecruiser showed up to stop them, and they destroyed it because the Klingons on that ship had been corrupted by the illusion of peace. Chorus is like, hey Worf, just because we've confessed our treachery and violent rejection of the regime you're sworn to serve, that doesn't mean you can't give us a tour of the ship, right? Worf's like, no, of course not. Let me show you around. As Worf conducts Chorus and Conmel around the ship, and they try to convince him to join them in whatever this is that they're doing, we cut to the bridge, where Data helpfully explains that the whole looking into the dying man's eyes and then screaming their heads off bit in sickbay earlier was the Klingon death ritual, and it's done as a warning to the dead that a Klingon warrior is about to arrive. Picard's like, oh, neat. Then a Klingon ship arrives, commanded by this guy, Canera, who is following up on the same battle the Enterprise was sent to investigate. Picard tells him about the survivors they rescued from the freighter, and Canera says, okay, those guys are criminals who hijacked that freighter and attacked another Klingon ship. You send them over here as soon as our ship is within transporter range. Picard tells Tasha to send a security team to go get the Klingons. Tasha's like, do you want me to stay here again, or can I actually go have some fun this time? Picard's like, just go, don't have an attitude about it. Tasha leads the security team, and they intercept Worf, Chorus, and Conmel in the hallway. Everyone freezes. Chorus is like, don't let them take us, Worf! Join us! A nearby elevator opens, and a little girl just comes charging out into the middle of the standoff. Chorus picks her up, and Tasha freaks out like, oh shit, Bridge! We have a hostage situation! One of the Klingons just picked up a kid, and I think he's gonna, start ripping her arms and legs off or something. Chorus hands the girl to Worf, who passes her back to her mother, and then Chorus and Conmel allow themselves to be taken into custody and led away by the security team. Tasha's like, damn, that was a close one. Worf's like, what do you mean? Tasha says, I thought Chorus was gonna crack that kid's skull open like an egg, and peel off her skin and make cracklings with it, and pull out a hand blender and mix her blood into a frothy beverage and drink it while we all stood by watching helplessly. Worf's like, that would be the act of a coward. A Klingon would never do that. Unless they decided to. The rules are pretty flexible. Worf goes to the bridge and asks Picard for permission to speak to Kinera, the Klingon commander. Picard's like, sure, do whatever you want. This is your episode. Worf pleads with Kinera not to take Chorus and Conmel back to be executed for their crimes. He says, send them to a planet in the Halley system where they can meet death on their feet with a weapon in their hands, not tied and helpless like a couple of chumps. I love the idea that the Klingons just have designated planets where they drop prisoners off and abandon them to certain death if they feel too bad about executing them by a more formal method. Seems a shame to just hang this guy. He was a pretty badass warrior. Oh shit. Send him to Quokar 4 and let him get mauled to death by a space lion. There, now I'm in a much better place about this. Kinera's hands are tied. He needs to execute Chorus and Conmel by the book. Picard sends Tasha to escort the prisoners to the transporter room, and by the time she gets there, they've already escaped by piecing together a gun from components of their uniforms. I guess the Klingons just forgot to smarten the Federation up about that when they signed the peace treaty? Oh, by the way, if you ever have to arrest one of us, you should know that our clothes all have gun parts hidden in them, so watch out for that. It just slipped their minds. Anyway, the security team arrives just as they're making their escape. Conmel is killed, but Chorus flees and makes it all the way to engineering, where he climbs up next to the warp core and points his gun at it, threatening to blast it and destroy the entire ship. Worf shows up to try to talk some sense into him, but Chorus is well past that. He's like, come with me, Worf. If they refuse to let me go, I'll blow up their ship and kill them all. They're not ready for that. Let's you and me just fly off together into the galaxy like two great birds of prey. Oh shit, birds of prey. I didn't even mean to say that. Worf says, don't look for battles out there. Look for battles in here, man. Overcoming our inner weaknesses. That's the true test of a warrior. Chorus is like, what kind of hippie bullshit is that? I'm a Klingon. I don't want to experience personal growth. I want killing. Worf's like, okay, and he pulls his phaser and he shoots him. Chorus falls back and crashes through the glass walkway. I guess the safety inspector missed that one before the ship left space dock, huh? And lands on the floor in front of the others. Worf climbs down, looks in his eyes, screams, does the whole bit, and then it's over. Back on the bridge, Picard informs Kinera that Chorus and Conmel are dead. Kinera asks Worf how they died, and Worf says, they died well. One was killed by a nameless security guard while trying to escape, and then I just killed Chorus after he ranted for a bit about wanting to go on a rampage across the galaxy or something. I don't know, I kind of zoned out after a certain point. Picard asks if Kinera would like the bodies of Chorus and Conmel returned, but Kinera says, nah, they're just dead meat now. Dispose of them however you want. Sweet, looks like the ship's school is getting 2 new skeletons for anatomy class. Kinera says, hey Worf, maybe when your tour on the Enterprise is over, you'll come over here and serve with us. We have a lot to learn from each other. We can teach you how to pop a human's head off with your thumb. You can teach us which one is the salad fork. Worf's like, hey, thanks for the invite, I appreciate it. And then, after they hang up on Kinera, Worf gets super weird about it. He says to Picard, I was only being polite. I'd never leave the Enterprise. Picard's like, oh, I know. None of us will. Even if you did leave, you'd always come back. You'd end up right back here. You'll die here. We all will. Da 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 da. The end. So, this episode was TNG's answer to the presumed question from the audience of, when are we gonna see some fucking Klingons? I suppose it satisfies that question in the most elementary sense. We see some Klingons in addition to Worf, and they get up to some typical Klingon mischief. The episode also has a premise with some potential. These are old school Klingons, unhappy with the new peaceful order. It's an obvious but nonetheless viable starting point from which to explore this part of the show's status quo, which sets it apart from the Star Trek that came before. The Klingons are no longer the bad guys. They're allies, but what does that mean? How do our heroes feel about that? How do the Klingons feel about it? A story like this featuring Klingons who reject the new status quo, paired off with Worf, who is a product of that status quo, is a good lens through which to examine all of that. That's in theory. In practice, Heart of Glory mostly plays like the producers just really wanted to do a Klingon episode to get it out of the way, and this is what they came up with. Having it be a Worf episode makes sense. The problem there is it's only about half of a Worf episode. We start out with Worf. He's the one who gets the first line, informing Captain Picard that they've been ordered to the neutral zone, and he seems excited at the prospect that they're flying in to investigate the aftermath of a battle. But then Worf recedes into the background for a long time, while the other characters take their time approaching the Talarian freighter and playing with Geordi's visor and finding and rescuing the Klingons from the freighter. Worf's not even on the away team when they find Korus, Con-Mel, and the almost dead guy. How does that make any sense from a dramatic perspective or an in-universe perspective? Picard even makes a point of telling Tasha not to join the away team. And Worf is standing right there holding his dick. He's not officially a member of the security team at this point, but they kinda treat him like he is. Why not send Worf on the away team so at least they have a security-ish member as they prepare to enter this dangerous situation, which both Riker and Picard agree feels like it might be a trap? That way, Worf can be there when they find the Klingons on the freighter, instead of hearing about it secondhand and then having to ask for permission to tag along with Picard to sickbay in order to meet them. Things get a little more interesting once Worf and the other Klingons are finally put together. For a while, anyway. The tension between Worf and Korus and Con-Mel over Worf's membership in Starfleet is intriguing, and the hinting that Korus and Con-Mel aren't telling the truth about what happened to them on that freighter builds expectations that another shoe is going to drop eventually, but then that tension dissipates, and when that other shoe does drop, it hits the floor with a dull thud, and that's about it. Part of the problem is with Korus and Con-Mel. It's obvious that they're up to no good, but the specific brand of no good to which they are up is so vague that it's hard to get too excited about it. They hate living in peace, so they were trying to leave the Klingon Empire to go somewhere else where they could live like true Klingons. Okay, and now that they're on the Enterprise, their plan is to, what? Escape? Take over the ship? They don't seem in that much of a hurry to do either of those things. But part of the problem, a big part, is also with Worf. At this point in the series, we really have no idea who he is. This episode would seem like a great opportunity to start fixing that problem, but that doesn't happen because, I think, the creators of the show don't have any idea who Worf is yet either. He shares the story of how he was orphaned in a Romulan attack and adopted by someone in Starfleet, but that only sketches in a little of his background. That doesn't tell us who he is. Do Korus and Con-Mel succeed at tempting Worf to abandon the Federation and join them in their, whatever it is, even a little bit? It doesn't seem like it, but how can you even tell? Worf remains a blank slate throughout the episode. It would have been a lot more interesting had he seemed more interested in what Korus and Con-Mel were selling. Instead, Worf shrugs off their attempt to turn him to their side with little apparent effort and defaults to spouting the standard party line about living with honor and devotion to duty and fighting the battles inside with yourself rather than outside with others. Not that any of that is bad, and not that having Worf believe it or say it is bad, but there's no conflict, no suspense, not even a moment where it feels like Worf might take their side. They try. There's a commercial break that's built around a moment of decision for Worf when he's caught between Tasha and the security team on one side and Korus and Con-Mel on the other, and I'm supposed to be on the edge of my seat over who Worf's going to choose, but I don't buy it for a second. There's zero chance Worf is going to turn his back on Starfleet for these guys. We haven't seen him be tempted by them, and they haven't even made an argument to Worf for why he should join them other than, come on, man, don't you want to do some real Klingon shit? You know what might have made the situation more compelling? If the episode had been written with more awareness of Worf's place in the series at that point. because Worf still doesn't really have a place. After Tasha dies, he becomes the new chief of security, but right now, he's still just a floater. Sometimes he's working at one of the forward stations on the bridge, sometimes he's going along with the security team, but often he's just kind of there, doing, I don't know, something. His duties can't be that pressing, since he's able to spend almost all of his scenes in this episode hanging out with Chorus and Conmel, never once getting summoned by Picard or Riker to get back to work. What if Chorus or Conmel had noticed that? What if part of their pitch to Worf was that he doesn't fit in as well with these Starfleet types as he thinks he does? What's your job here, Worf? What do you contribute? What do these people allow you to contribute? Would they even miss you if you disappeared? Take what had been a weakness of Worf's characterization up to this point and use it to make the story more interesting. I know I'm rewriting the episode. I try not to do that. It's just, this needed something. Not necessarily what I just said, but something. Like so much else of TNG's first season, this all plays as flat and perfunctory. There's no drama, there's no excitement, there's nothing to keep us guessing, nothing to draw us in and make us wonder what's going to happen next. There's not even any tragedy in the demise of Chorus and Conmel, which I guess there's supposed to be. Worf pleads for them to be allowed to die with honor instead of being executed as prisoners. Kanera, the commander of the Klingon ship, seems pleased that they both ultimately died while trying to escape because that's the kind of death Klingon warriors like them deserve, but I don't feel any of that for them. Chorus and Conmel don't come across like tragic relics of a bygone age, men with anachronistic beliefs who have been left behind by society, who might have contributed something positive but didn't because they were unable or unwilling to change. No, they just seem like contrarian assholes. And while I'd like to at least be able to say I'm glad they die because fuck 'em, I don't even feel that. I don't feel anything for them. I don't care. The plot, such as it is not only flat, it's also thin, which is why this episode, in addition to everything else I've been saying about it, is slow and padded as hell. Why do we need to observe the approach to the Talarian freighter in such excruciating detail? Why do they take so long locating and rescuing the Klingons? Why is there so much playing around with Geordi's visor, which, like I said, is kind of cool for its own sake, but has nothing to do with anything else in the episode, and brings an already plodding story to a complete halt for several minutes. All of that is done because they don't have enough to fill an hour, and they're playing for time. It's not fun to watch. Having said all of that, there is something that is fun to watch. Not fun enough to salvage the episode, but a bit. And that something, or some things, I should say, are Chorus and Conmel. They aren't good characters, their plans and motivations don't make a lot of sense, they aren't super interesting, but they are Klingons before Star Trek, particularly TNG, decided that Klingons needed to be taken seriously instead of being presented as the ridiculous goofballs that they so obviously are. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying Klingons should be overt comic relief. They can and should be imposing, threatening, formidable, whether presented as heroes or villains or something else. I just think no effort should be wasted trying to make them or their society seem plausible, or like something we as the viewer should take seriously. They're big, rowdy space cavemen who love nothing more than to fight, then get drunk and make up terrible songs about the fight they were just in. They're ridiculous and over the top, and that's what I like about them. In terms of their personalities and the way they're portrayed by Vaughn Armstrong and Charles Hyman, respectively, Chorus and Conmel are right in the sweet spot. They're messy, theatrical doofuses who think they're way smarter and tougher than they actually are, and when one of them gets started on a rant about the true Klingon way or whatever, it's as entertaining as this episode gets. When Chorus is pointing his gun at the warp core and talking to Worf at the end, one of his lines is, "I would rather die here than let the traitors of Kling pick the meat from my bones." What a delight. Also, establishing that the name of the Klingon home planet is Kronos instead of Kling, huge mistake. I know the name Kronos was introduced in Star Trek VI. Great movie, one of the best Star Trek movies. Should have called the Klingon planet Kling. How do you not embrace something that perfectly fucking dopey? I'll never understand it. Heart of Glory was directed by Rob Bowman, who was one of the regular directors of the show's early years, helming 5 episodes in Season 1 and 7 in Season 2, including one of the show's very best, Q Who, and one of the show's very worst, the season-ending clip show Shades of Grey. And then he came back one more time in Season 4 and directed the episode Brothers, which is a pretty damn good show. This episode was written by Maurice Hurley from a story by Hurley and Herbert Wright and D.C. Fontana. Maurice Hurley was hired by Gene Roddenberry to be head writer in Season 1 because he wanted someone who wouldn't question his vision and would just do what they were told, and that's what Hurley did until he eventually realized that Gene Roddenberry was full of shit, and then he quit the show. Good for him, but unfortunately, that doesn't make this episode any better. Those are my thoughts on Heart of Glory. What do you think of this episode? Please share your thoughts with me in the comments. If you'd like to support this channel, and I sure wish you would, if you can afford it, you can do so by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Steve Shives, becoming a channel member by clicking the join button, or by making a one-time gift by clicking the thanks button, or via PayPal or Venmo. Links are in the description. Please join me next week as I continue with this batch of reviews of Klingon-centered episodes. From TNG, we move on to DS9 with a look at an episode from Season 2 of that series, Blood Oath. See you next time for that one. Thanks for watching, and take care, everybody.